Good evening, and welcome to tonight's workshop of the Board of Education. Tonight, Anne Arundel County Public Schools will present Superintendent George Arlotto's recommended fiscal year 2022 capital budget. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed live on AACPS YouTube channel. If we are interrupted during the broadcast of tonight's meeting, the meeting will be stopped and we will take a short recess until we can continue. If for some reason we cannot continue, we will notify you as soon as possible when a new meeting will be scheduled. The board attorney has asked that I read the following statement. The Maryland Open Meetings Act, a state law, requires public meetings to be open to the public and to be, quote, held in places reasonably accessible to individuals who would like to attend these meetings. The virtual format of this workshop of the Board of Education is due to the COVID-19 emergency and is necessary in light of the serious health risks associated with public gatherings, as well as the governor and county executives' various executive orders limiting public gatherings. While a virtual meeting of this type was not envisioned by the Open Meetings Act, steps have been taken to ensure that this virtual meeting includes alternative accessibility features that the Open Meetings Act's Compliance Board and the courts have reviewed and approved broadcasting the meeting with video and audio on cable TV and on the web. The board attorney has opined that the public access provided by this technology makes this virtual meeting reasonably accessible to the public and provides appropriate opportunity to observe the conduct of the board's workshop consistent with prevailing best practices during this emergency situation and therefore complies with the Open Meetings Act. We will start this evening's workshop with a roll call of members. Mr. Granite.
Here.
Ms. Schallheim.
Present.
Ms. Antwine, I do not believe has had an opportunity to join us yet. Mr. Gilliland unfortunately had a prior commitment he was unable to get out of, and so if he's able to join us at the latter part, he will. Mr. Leib?
Here.
Ms. Hummer?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Ellis?
Here.
Thank you all very much. We're going to be receiving a presentation and then we'll be taking questions in roll call order. Just like with many of our workshops, I will ask that the board members limit their questions to 2 per round, and we will conduct as many rounds as necessary to get through all the questions. But it ensures that our representative districts and our members each have a thorough opportunity to present their questions to staff as appropriate and have their voices heard. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the table over to Dr. Arlotto and his team. And I first want to start off by thanking them for all of the hard work that they are doing. Amidst a virtual opening, unlike nothing we've ever seen before, we also have this thing called the budget happens every year. And they've done an outstanding job going above and beyond to meet and to come up with a budget in a time where uncertainty of revenue, uncertainty of numbers, and between the state, the feds, and the county are going to make this even more challenging. So I want to thank all of you for all of your hard work. I know Matt and Alex and all those guys have worked so incredibly hard to make this happen. And so virtual round of applause for everybody. Indeed. Dr. Arlotto, you now have the table. I'm going to turn it over to you and we'll get rolling.
Thank you very much, President Corkadell, and thank you, members of the board, for, as always, taking time to meet with us. This is a workshop for you. The documents were sent to you in advance, I hope, and I'm certain that you had a chance to review them. So we'll begin, or this evening, as you know, and for the publics that are dialing in, that this is a review, board workshop review of the FY-2022 capital budget and capital improvement program. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sheknovich, and he'll begin to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Arlotto and Madam President. With me this evening, I've got Ms. Lisa Seaman Crawford, Director of Facilities, and Mr. Carl Ruth, Supervisor of Construction. And for the public, I'm Alex Sheknovich, the Chief Operating Officer. Momentarily, Bob will put up the PowerPoint presentation for this evening regarding the board's FY-22 capital budget and capital improvement program. We will begin with a timeline and process overview, and then we will dig into the more specific projects and specifics of the budget itself. As the board is aware, the timeline for the capital improvement budget differs from that of the operating budget. The capital improvement budget timeline is driven by state stipulated milestones and dates of submission in order to allow us to become eligible for state funding. And we'll dig into that a little bit deeper. But the process essentially begins in July when the state puts out at some point in time in that month the guidance documents, which outline the procedures, the requirements, the submission modalities, etc. Staff begins to review that and pulls together the preliminary recommendation in August for the superintendent's review in preparation for September, where we find ourselves today. So traditionally in September, we hold a workshop to allow a deeper overview of the capital budget itself, allow the board members to ask questions. And that's a prelude to the meeting we will hold next Wednesday, at which time the board will receive public testimony, another briefer presentation from staff, ultimately the superintendent's recommendation, and the board will be asked to vote on a capital budget at that time. It's imperative that they do that because the state's submission timeline dictates that in order for Anne Arundel County Public Schools to be eligible for state funding, the submission package has to be up at the state by October, date specific, and again, that's provided by the state. Staff at the IAC, the Interagency Commission on Public School Construction, reviews the submissions from Anne Arundel County as well as the other 23 LEAs for technical sufficiency, compliance with all the applicable rules and regulations regarding the submittals, all the information, etc. And if any corrections or alterations or additional information is required, naturally they will seek that from the 24 jurisdictions, us included. That work is critical because in November, the IAC then presents their recommendations and their overview of all 24 jurisdictions to the Interagency Commission. In November, we also are required to submit a letter of fiscal support and concurrence for the plan from the county executive. Again, that's an eligibility requirement. The recommendations then and that work from November then goes to an actual IAC meeting that's held in December, and that's held up in Baltimore at the State Department of Education, 200 West Baltimore. And the IAC then in that formal meeting receives the recommendations from the staff and indicates by vote, recorded vote, recommendations that total about 75% of the governor's baseline $250 million capital improvement budget. Obviously, the governor's not transmitted his budget yet for the year, but $250 million is the operational guideline that the IAC typically uses. So they will recommend projects statewide totaling about 75% of that $250 million figure. In February, as you know, the board will hold its meetings regarding the combined operating and capital budgets, and that is for the purpose of remitting them to the county executive at that point, understanding that the remission to the state had already occurred back in October. In addition, in the month of February here in Anne Arundel County, there is a planning advisory board in county statute that serves as an advisory capacity and reviews not just the Board of Education's budgets, but all of the other capital budgets here within Anne Arundel County budgets, inclusive of entities like the libraries, the community college, public works, etc. Also in the month of February, the IEC will reconvene and indicate recommendations for 90% of the statewide budget. The timing of that is critical because, as you know, the governor proposes his budget actually in January. So by February, the IEC actually has more accurate information, and should the governor potentially increase the amount of funding that he is recommending for capital budgets, the IEC is now privy to that information and can expand their recommendations up to 90%, and that occurs in February. That 90% recommendation level is then transmitted to the General Assembly. The General Assembly is already in session, as you know, beginning in January, but they conclude their work in April. And it is the conclusion of that work that codifies the final amount of funding for capital budgets. Having known what the General Assembly now has passed in May, the IEC will reconvene again to basically reconcile, and should there be additional funds, issue any final approvals, or should there be any reductions in funds, naturally, they would have to make some adjustments in the downward direction. Also, as the board knows, on May the 1st, the county executive, having had received no later than March 1, the budget from the Board of Education, by May 1, the county executive has to propose his budgetary recommendations, again, both operating and capital, to the county council. The county council then has from May 1st to no later than June 15th to consider the county executive's recommendations, understanding again that by then the executive and council has full knowledge of the amounts approved by the state, and the council will strike a budget no later than the 15th of June, which will be transmitted to the Board of Education to consider and adopt later that June, in order for us to start the fiscal year on July 1st. So that's essentially the time clock associated with a capital budget. And again, I took a few seconds to differentiate that from the operating budget, so we're all on the same page. In terms of the sequence then, moving away from the timeline, the next slide shows the sequence of the process. Again, this is all state driven. This is the exact same process for all 24 jurisdictions, and there is no essential variation from this for any jurisdiction who's seeking state funding. So the very first stage is a feasibility study. It is 100% locally funded, and that is at the local level for us to essentially validate the project and essentially create the business case for why the project is necessary, what is hoped to be achieved, can the project physically at the feasibility study be essentially properly constructed, etc. So the feasibility study is that local validation that's then remitted to the state. The state then reviews that, and at their level, and they are contemplating giving us local planning authority. So the state IAC and their designees, which goes beyond the Maryland State Department of Education, it also includes entities such as the Maryland Department of Planning, the Maryland Department of General Services, and also, if needed, other agencies such as the Maryland Historic Trust, etc. Will review those plans and determine whether, in the state's eyes, they also believe that the project is essentially valid and eligible for funding consideration. And then beyond that, obviously, all future considerations have to do with fiscal constraints and fiscal limits. The projects that us and the other 23 jurisdictions in Maryland submit for really fall into two categories. Quite simply put, the first category is called major projects, and that is essentially either ground up construction, the entire demolition and reconstruction of a school, the entire renovation or possible additions onto schools. So these are the main headline type projects. As with all projects, the state has an eligibility list. They do not participate in many of the things that are required to construct a school. And I'll just name two, for example. They don't participate in the design portion, and they don't participate in the furnishings, just to name two. Or any offsite improvements. So there should be roadway improvements or utilities brought in to the property, any traffic signalization adjustments. Again, the state participates in none of those. Those would be ineligible. So taking the total cost of the project and working your way through that list of the very long list of ineligibles, Anne Arundel County Public Schools typically receives about 25% of the funding for the project from the state for a major project, thus leaving the balance about 75% needing to be picked up by the county government and the citizens of this county. The other category of work that the state participates in is something called systemics. And systemic is essentially a component replacement project. So you're not renovating or replacing the entire school, you are essentially replacing a piece. So think of replacing just the boilers, think of replacing just the roof or just the air conditioning chiller. So it is a replacement of an existing capital asset, and there is a list of assets the state will participate in. Unlike the formula-driven calculations and a longer list of ineligibles, the state will participate up to 50% of the reasonable costs for these projects, again, backing out things like design, inspection fees, etc. So at the end of the day, on those component replacement projects, because the list of ineligible items is so much smaller, Anne Arundel County Public Schools typically can receive about 42% of the project's costs from the state, and thus leaving a much smaller portion, about 58%, coming from the tax base here in Anne Arundel County. The next two slides will give you some historical perspective. This one takes a look at the state funding support going back to 1998. And you've seen as time has moved on, Anne Arundel County Public Schools has been asking for increasing amounts of funding support from the state of Maryland. And the red line indicates the percentage of state funds that we received in any of those given years. And just by one frame of reference, I might add that Anne Arundel County Public Schools has about 10% of the real estate footprint of the entire state. And that's not a hard gauge by the state, but rule of thumb, if we have about 10% of the real estate in the state under roof, then, you know, thinking in terms of about 10% of the statewide funding probably does make sense. The other bars then, the green color bar is what we asked for in any given year, and the purple is what we received. Going to the next chart, it takes a look again at the funding blend, but this time, instead of looking simply from the state, we're now looking at both the state and the county. So the purple line that you'll see at the bottom is the percentage of funding in a given fiscal year that we received from the state. And you'll see that kind of oscillates for projects between that 20 and 30% range overall, leaving about somewhere between 70 and 80% of that tab to come from Anne Arundel County proper. And again, the bars underneath for each fiscal year, the blue is what was funded in that year by the county, and the purple is what was funded by the state in that year. Advancing the slide and continuing with some of the variables that we have to deal with year in and year out really has to do with, to begin with, the overall funding availability and the predictability of funding. You know, from a revenue perspective, there's good years and there's bad years. And we've seen a little bit of both. And if you read between the tea leaves, it appears that we're going to be, you know, heading into some leaner, tighter years here, at least in the foreseeable future. So the overall level of funding is certainly an issue. And then the predictability. Ideally, you would want almost a steady state, more of a leveled funding stream instead of this sawtooth type funding stream that causes some more difficulties and challenges in terms of predictably or methodically being able to predict when particular projects are going to commence and be funded. In addition to that, the regulatory and environmental compliance issues and the costs associated with those are continuously evolving, and a greater and greater proportion of our funds on any given project are devoted to simply meeting those regulatory and environmental compliance requirements that obviously are necessary for us to receive the building permits, the grading permits, etc. Another variable that we deal with here, and we deal with it actually here in Anne Arundel County to a greater degree than some of our brother and sister LEAs, is the availability of qualified contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers. And this is not just a near-term effect. Obviously, COVID has had some impacts on that, nationally, of course, with supply chains, et cetera. But we're in a very robust construction market here, situated between Baltimore and Washington, coupled with two big consumers of construction capacity, that being the airport and that being the combination of the Fort Meade and NSA and the military industrial complex that surrounds it. So there's a tremendous demand on contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers. Additionally, there is the prevailing wage requirements that the state imposes. It's required on any project in which we would receive more than 25% of the funding. And because we do here in Anne Arundel County and very near surrounding counties have a higher cost of doing business, a higher CPI type of environment as well, the prevailing wage rates applicable to our projects on those state funding projects are in fact higher than you'll see in many of our sister jurisdictions, either further west or further east. Finally, the state basically identifies what the modeling cost is for a project and the degree to which they will participate in the project. And you'll see that for FY-2021, the year that we're currently in, the state would participate in costs amassing to no more than $391 per square foot. And because of price escalation and in the supply and labor markets, that has been increased in accordance to the state guidance this year to $406 per square foot. The capital budget that we are presenting in the next slide, you'll see again is broken down into those two categories. The total budget request, so this is going to be combined to both state and county, is $234,509,000. And just as a point of reference, the capital budget that we requested in FY-2001 was $214.2 million. So you'll see this $234.5 million request is north of last year's, last fiscal year, the current one, 214.2. And again, by way of reference, in the current fiscal year, in all combined sources, we received 163.1 million. So 163.1 is the current year. But we're sitting here tonight talking about FY-22 and taking a look at those two major categories. That $234.5 million is really subdivided into the 188 million attributable to those large capital projects. Again, as I indicated earlier, that is for new construction projects, replacement schools, renovation schools, and additions onto schools. The recurring projects, those component replacement projects, as well as other ineligible projects such as painting or asphalt replacement, concrete sidewalk replacements or extensions, etc., that accounts for about $46,450,000. So that's the high level introduction. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Seaman Crawford, and she's going to walk you through each one of the major line item funding category requests and give you more information about what each one of those requests entails. Ms. Crawford?
Thank you, Alex. Just a reminder, the blue bar at the top of the slide indicates our funding requests broken down into state and county funding. Including for all day K, included in this $10 million request is state funding only for additions at Sunset and Ben Bachlan Elementary schools, and state and local funding for additions at Brockbridge and Mead Heights. This request will conclude all our all day K program. Additions. Our $4 million request is for a 4-classroom addition to Southgate Elementary based on consistent increasing school enrollment and 5 portable classrooms. This request is for local funding only. The selection process for additions is based on our projections in the master plan. First, we see if the additional enrollment can be resolved with temporary classrooms until projections go down, redistricting occurs, or a new school is built. None of these solutions are applicable to Southgate. The next three projects are requests for continuation of construction funds for Quarterfield, Hillsmere, and Rippling Woods. The board approved a replacement school for all three projects on their current site. Each new school design is scheduled to be complete in December. The next steps will be submitting for permits and bidding. Construction will commence in the spring of 2021 with a completion date of August 2023. The prototype replacement at Quarterfield will provide quite a change to the current school that is a vintage 1969 model. It will be constructed in the southeast corner of the site, allowing the existing school to remain operational during construction. All spaces and areas provided by the educational specifications will be provided, including a before and after care room with a separate entrance. Hillsmere. Although Hillsmere Elementary School's capacity will not increase with the replacement school, the learning opportunities in the new facility will. The proposed layout will meet all programmatic and area requirements, in addition to providing a current life safety building code and compliant building. The main entrance will now face Arundel on the Bay Road, and a retaining wall will separate the building from the critical areas located on the site. Rippling Woods. At last, the only remaining open floor plan elementary school will be replaced. Not only will the students benefit from a noise reduction within the school, they will also benefit from less outside noise with the sound abatement aspect of the building design. The new building will increase capacity, providing much needed classroom space, replacing the 7 relocatables currently housing students. Old Mill West. Our $75 million request is for the second year of construction funding. The school will be built on what is currently known as Papa John's Farm. It will be designed with a state-rated capacity of 1,882, which includes an 80-student regional special education program. An ad alternate for 12 additional classrooms is included in the design, and if accepted, would bring the total capacity to 2,137. Construction documents for this project will also be complete in December, with an anticipated bid date in early spring, and a construction start date around May of 2021. We are currently working with the county on a resolution for AACPS to take possession of the property in December timeframe. West County Elementary School. In response to rapid growth in West County, a new approximately 500-seat capacity elementary school was proposed last fiscal year, and funding for design was received. This year's $19 million is a request for the balance of design funding and first-year construction funds. The board approved the educational specifications in April, and the schematic design documents will be submitted to the board for approval in November. The property for the school site is located at 1127 Braggers Road in Odenton, Maryland. The county is in possession of the property, and our engineers are working with the staff at Planning and Zoning to change the county water and sewer master plan for the property. Old Mill Middle South. As the first piece of the dismantling of the Old Mill complex, Old Mill South will be built at Southgate Park. Our request is for $4.7 million, which will enable the design team to complete the design and be ready for a construction start in spring 2022, providing construction funds are available. Now we can talk about our reoccurring projects. Our request is for a total of $46.4 million. Many of these projects are based on the comprehensive maintenance plan that will be presented at the next board meeting. Most of the categories are locally funded except for building systemic renovations and aging school program, to which the state contributes funding. Health and safety. Our request is for $1.2 million. Includes projects such as fire alarms, PA systems, and other safety-related projects. Security, $3.75 million, includes new and replacement cameras, gates, AI phones, and security vestibules. We've completed 108 vestibules with another 21 in design or construction. Building system renovations or systemics, we're requesting $21 million. The projects included will be roofs, HVA systems, and this year we're requesting funding for roof project at Southgate Elementary and the balance of funds for the HVAC project at North County High School. Maintenance backlog, $7 million, includes projects such as generators, ceiling and lights, concrete asphalt work, replacement of doors, windows, carpet, etc., septic and fuel tank replacements. This is a area that we've been underfunded for many years. Roof replacements. Excuse me, $3.3 million. Our priority list is based on yearly inspection reports and is locally funded. Roof replacements are funded in building systemics and through this category, assisting us in keeping up with the needs of the system. Relocatable classrooms, $1.2 million. Funds are used for moving relocatables to schools with increased enrollment and are locally funded through impact fees. Asbestos removal, $600,000, includes removal of asbestos floor tile, insulation, soffits, and doors. Barrier-free, $350,000 for ADA-based modifications based on the recommendations from the ADA committee and range from bathroom modifications, curb cuts, grab bars, playground and locker modifications. School bus replacement, $800,000 for the cyclic renewal of the Board of Education owned school buses. Health room modifications, $350,000. Projects are funded based on the priority list developed by the health department. School furniture, $600,000. Replacement of worn, broken school furniture or to supplement classroom furniture for increased enrollment. Upgrade various schools, $800,000 for modifications based on program needs and age of facilities. We're going to be doing some media walls, kitchen upgrades and sewer upgrades to Arlington Echo, and small modifications for office space for APs, counselors, and other additional staff. Vehicle replacement, $400,000 for dump trucks, box trucks, backhoes, and maintenance vehicles. The aging school program, $600,000, state grant funds that are 100% of our construction cost. Examples of these projects include elevator upgrades, folding door replacement, and brick repointing. Playground equipment, $300,000. The priority list was developed based on age of equipment and number of structures. Athletic stadiums, $3.5 million. It's used for bleachers, track, and turf replacement. And when we're fortunate enough to receive state grants for stadium upgrades, including second turf fields, this is where the funds are reappropriated. Planned work includes bleachers at Annapolis High School, turf replacement at Annapolis and South River, and refurbishing the running track at Arundel. Drives and lots, $1 million, used for expanding parking, making safety changes based on priority list developed by transportation. This year's funds will be for work completed at Arundel Middle School and improve Oakwood Elementary School's drive and parking lot.
Thank you, Ms. Seaman Crawford. That concludes our presentation, Mr. Superintendent, Madam President, and we'll turn it back over to you and your colleagues for any questions regarding the items we've covered so far this evening.
Thank you very much. We're going to take roll call order, starting with Mr. Grannon. Any questions?
No, thank you for that very comprehensive and detailed explanation.
Great. Ms. Schulheim?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm always grateful for all of this, and I think the design and construction of schools is really cool. So I had a couple of questions. First, as it relates to materials costs in the time of COVID, have you seen any great fluctuation in building materials costs of late? I was just curious about that.
Ms. Crawford?
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, we're seeing a little bit, but we haven't put a lot of things out to bids, but we are seeing a lot more contractors, which was making it more competitive. So.
Oh, good. So any sort of like, I don't know, for example, like the cost of a 2x4 might be offset by the bidding war to get the job, if that makes sense.
A bit. We're still seeing an increase, but it hasn't been to the point where we can't do a project.
Fantastic. I had a question about any other items within the presentation that have come up as a result of COVID in general, just for the public listening, for the benefit of them.
No, ma'am. This is a multi-year capital program, and it's largely driven by a combination of the MGT study that was completed in the 2015 year, as well as our comprehensive long-range maintenance plan. So those are the two driving factors for a 6-year capital construction campaign.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. And then my last question has to do with the building where some of our staff are currently located. It was my understanding that that building was once a school, sort of has seen better days, and if any of the projects within this would result in the movement of that staff to another location, and the possible hopeful maybe giving back of that land or exchanging it for other land for other future school projects.
So the direct answer is no. To begin with, the state doesn't participate at all in any adult space. So they only participate in space for students. Given that we are woefully behind our needs at schools, we've been focusing our resources essentially on school-based projects as opposed to adult and office-based projects.
Okay, great. And then the Old Mill Middle South land, that's something we already, or the county already has in their possession, yet to be transferred to us, correct?
It's currently known as Southgate Park. And when the time comes, so we've already had these conversations with the county, we want it to be productively used as a park and enjoyed by the citizens for as long as absolutely possible. So it will be a just-in-time transfer from the county to the Board of Education.
Perfect. Well, again, really wonderful presentation, very exciting times, lots of wonderful projects on the horizon. I'm really just excited to be part of it and to support it as always. So thank you so much. I'm good with my questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leib. I believe next, I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Ms. Antwine has not been able to join us, I believe. Ms. Antwine? Okay. So Mr. Leib.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I was hoping that when I looked out my window, I'd see fireworks and all kinds of celebration going on with all-day K projects finally being completed. What year did they start again, Mr. Sachnovich?
2005.
Oh, yes, I remember that. And also open space classrooms, one of the greatest experiments of public education. Such a great idea. How long have we been replacing those also?
Pushing on almost 2 decades now. It was, I believe, 2003. We started out with 36 in total. And as Ms. Seaman Crawford said, Rippling Woods would be our last elementary school. And then we only have the old middle schools left to tackle, and that will take care of the rest of the secondary schools. And we will be glad when that campaign has concluded, just like we'll be glad when the kindergarten campaign is concluded.
Well, congratulations on putting together a good CIP. One question I did have, when you go up for your meeting with the IAC staff, does anyone from the county executive's office accompany you?
So they have in years past, so it's hit and miss. I mean, they're aware of the meetings. Quite often they've accompanied us to the December meeting with the formal IAC rather than the staff level meetings that we have that are a precursor. But yes, they have attended both in prior years, but it's hit and miss.
Well, I just would like to, for the record, urge them to show up at all those meetings, because the county's not only verbal but physical support makes an impression on the staff and the IAC. So thank you very much for a very detailed presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Hummer.
Yes, Mr. Live took my question. I was going to ask how long it's been since that we've been working on kindergarten additions. Just for the public to know, there's the big push to add pre-K, and we will be starting over with pre-K if that passes as well. It's taken us 15 years to get to where we have all of the kindergarten additions in place, and so that would be another struggle. I was actually at Brockbridge Elementary today during lunchtime and saw the principal, and she was telling me how excited she was that they're getting their kindergarten edition and finally to get that in there. So the schools are ready for that. Same thing with the open space schools, is hallelujah. And very glad that that's done. As always, I appreciate all the hard work that goes into this and the vision. And I also appreciate that even in the time of COVID, where we're seeing some things, we're still being aggressive in our push for what we need for our schools on the capital end, and the improvements that we need to make, and the expansions and the upgrading. And so I'm glad to see that we are still moving forward as boldly as we have in the past. And so thank you very much. Looking forward to all these new schools and additions and renovations coming down the pike.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith.
Mr. Sachnovich, Ms. Seaman Crawford, it's always a pleasure, but I have no questions. Ms. Ellis?
Yes, I'm back. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Takes me a minute to find the button sometimes. So I'm sorry, I lost the document in front of me. One of the line items I believe is health and safety. Is any of that at this point related, and forgive me if you covered it, there was a lot of information. Any of that at this point related to COVID? I've been hearing, and I know it's a minor part of the whole picture, but I've been hearing concerns about plexiglass at front offices, anything like that that's included in the capital.
Sure, Ms. Ellis. The answer to that is no. These are for capital eligible items. So they have to have a life expectancy of at least 15 years. So at a health and safety, those are typically, as Ms. Seaman Crawford said earlier, things like fire alarm systems, two-way public address systems that we can use for mass communications, evacuation purposes, etc. So they have to be tangible, construction-related, permanent items that have a life expectancy of at least 15 years typically.
Okay. And what about, I know now recently, the air units, the air system in the schools has come into question. Is that something that's looking to become a priority?
It is and has always been one of our priorities and remains so. As Ms. Crawford said, we're in the middle of a very large project, for example, at North County High School, and a large percentage of the systemic line item request this year, she indicated earlier, is focused at the HVAC system replacement program at North County High School. We're also currently actively under construction at a couple other schools, Annapolis Middle just being another one, to name a few.
Yeah, so does this current situation change what kind of system, or does it impact the cost of the systems as we redo them?
No, the type of systems that we specify have and do remain compliant with the requirements.
Okay. I think that's all I have right now. Ms. Corkadell, are you back with us? Because it would be your turn for questions. Actually, I am remiss in saying that, first of all, I too want to thank everyone for, well, Mr. Cheknovich and Seaman Crawford for excellent, thorough presentation. Personally, I'm very excited to see some of the projects right here in my neck of the woods. But thank you very much for your presentation. Are there more questions? I know we were going round with a couple questions per member, and then we're able to go back around. Ms. Corkadell, we were about to start over in case anyone has questions, so it's your turn. You're up if you have any questions. And you are on mute.
I don't have any questions at this time. I was listening the entire time. Thank you so much, Ms. Ellis, for
Oh yeah, no
picking
problem.
up there for me. I really don't have any questions. I'll just ask for hands up for those members who have additional questions of staff. Remember that we will be taking to vote possibly and entertaining motions during our next regularly scheduled business meeting on the 16th to this, which is our first vote round with this, and that with the final being, of course, in February, like we always do, reaffirming should any circumstances or conditions change. Ms. Ellis, did you have okay, you're muted. All right. I'm not seeing any further questions from anyone, Alex and Dr. Arlotto at this time. Thank you once again, Lisa, for always joining us and having that information on hand for us. Greatly appreciated. I believe this does conclude our workshop unless there's any comments. I'll stop for a second. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see everyone on the 14th. The board will be announcing an executive session to start at 5 p.m. on Monday the 14th, followed by a public work session related to an update on the reopening progress, specifically as it relates to virtual and in-person classes. Thank you all so very much. And our next regularly scheduled meeting is, of course, on Wednesday, September the 16th. We will go to enter into closed session at, can't remember if it's 8 or 8:30, because we do have a lot to take care of. And then we will resume into open public session at 10 a.m. Thank you all so very much for attending and for joining us this evening. See y'all soon.